Welcome to the Sleeping Barber Podcast.
Okay, so if you like brand tracking, this is a great episode to listen to. If you're into creative, this is also a great episode to listen to. If you want to understand models that are maybe a little bit better than the funnel, this is a great episode to listen to. What I'm getting at is there's amazing content in this episode. I really hope you enjoy the show. And just before we get started with this episode, V and I would love for this show to be super valuable to you. So if you could rate the podcast, leave a review, leave some feedback about who you'd like to hear about or the topics that are really important to you, that'd be great.
Welcome to the Sleeping Barber Podcast, a place for business leaders to get the best and most credible information on marketing, strategy, and innovation. Your hosts, Marc Binkley and Vassilis Douros, share their experiences as they gather insights from the world's leading experts. Now, on with the show.
You're just saying that tracksuits are like a great distinctive brand asset. It's true.
Yeah, it's. I think we didn't think about that a lot when we started Tracksuit. It was one of the, we were like, oh, this will be fun to play with.
Right.
But it has turned out to be amazing for in the B2B space to kind of show up as like a consumer brand.
Sweatsuit.
You know? And you go, yeah, in the sweatsuit. Yeah. The sweatsuit doesn't work quite as well. It is always a tracksuit in New Zealand, and then you come to the States, and it's like, oh, you're wearing a sweatsuit, and you're like, no, that's not the name of our company.
No, it's not. It was the end of 2021. We've been probably going about 6 months, and we designed and got our first 50 customers these grey tracksuits. Looking back, horrendously gross, but so loved. And now they were the first run of the tracksuits for our first 50 customers.
Oh,
and from there, each year it's a run. I was at we were over in San Francisco last year with one of our investors who put on the day footwork, and one of the speakers was John Hoke, the chief design officer at Nike for 33 years. Mm-hmm. And there I was in an Adidas track jacket, zip up, and John just got his hands, put it right over the top of the logo, and I said, John, if Nike wants to send me if Nike wants to send me Nike tracksuits, I'll wear them. And so on the weekends, I actually went and bought this lilac tracksuit chore jacket so that John never comes at me again.
That's awesome.
That's such a great story.
Yeah. Well, and just as an intro to you guys in this conversation, we're really excited that you're joining us. This is going to be part of our measurement series that we're covering on a whole bunch of different topics. Today, largely, or probably around brand tracking, I would imagine, and just that's essentially what you do. But it's really interesting because it's a really big problem. And I also want to kind of get into this idea that, like, for the last 15 years, I don't want to steal V's thunder, but he'll say he's a reformed performance marketer. But we've both been in that space, and I think us, like a lot of other people, went down this path of we can do one-to-one everything, we can measure everything, we can show performance and ROI and ROAS to like the single individual best headline on a search ad, like to a point where we're like, maybe that's not working as much anymore. But there's a gap now because I think of 15 years of focus where we don't have the tools in the same way for brand tracking that we do for performance. So super interesting to have you guys here. And I think as co-founders of Tracksuit, I'll let you kind of give a little bit about your career path to get here. But Connor and Matt, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks. So happy to be here. We love your show, and we're excited.
Amazing.
Grateful to be here.
Well, that's awesome. Thanks. Why don't we just start with that? Matt, maybe you can just give us a little bit of background. How do you go from what do I want to do when I grow up to now running a startup focused on brand tracking?
That's right, Mark. Ever since I was a little boy, I always wanted to get into the world of market research. Do you know what? I love that question because if I ask anybody in the world of market research, say, did you want to have a career here? Like, how did you end up in the world of effectiveness and research? No one in the world grows up saying, my career, I'm going to be in market research.
Yeah.
But I did have a great love of brands right from the early days. I remember running around in New Zealand playing soccer football, and the player of the day was sponsored by McDonald's, and you got a Happy Meal.
That's
right?
awesome.
And that, looking back now, it's like McDonald's was right in there when you're 6 years old, running around on the field, building their brand with you. And so whether it was McDonald's or Nike,
demand.
Yeah, right.
But like growing up with Nike and then reading Shoe Dog and Phil Knight's story, I've always had a love of brands and Connor as well. And Connor and I, co-founders of Tracksuit, we met 8 years ago at a previous company, and so this is our 4 years ago we came back together. My career from New Zealand, studied law and science, but also had the opportunity to join the first team in New Zealand rolling out Uber in 2015.
Oh, no way. Oh,
so this was before cars went on the roads, before Uber was a thing. It was a big technology business coming to the other side of the world, and there was 12 of us with the remit of go and figure it out, go win the market, and convince people to get into strangers' cars. Like, what?
Yeah.
That was a crazy concept.
It's so funny when you say it like that, because now it's totally normal, but you're like, yeah, that is a weird thing.
It's super weird. And so that for me was my first introduction to like big technology, big disruption in industries, and a really strong brand behind it. After a couple of years of helping launch and run Uber in New Zealand, Connor and I met. I went over to Sydney, Connor went to New York, and we were working for a company called Mishguru. It was a New Zealand startup, which was helping brands and agencies run their Snapchat accounts and campaigns. Snapchat was a new channel. It was a new way to connect with younger audiences. Everybody was figuring it out. And we had the only platform in the world that allowed McDonald's and Coca-Cola and PepsiCo and, you name it, and their agencies actually leverage this as a new channel. And so that was when we started to get into marketing technology, social media, marketing analytics, but also in the startup and scale-up world. And then, 4 years later, we linked back up in New Zealand. And Marc, your introduction around the world of performance marketing, where's brands, what is measurement, how do brands grow? Like, that's exactly the challenge that we came in to solve, is how do we build Tracksuit in a way that can sit alongside performance marketing, but shine a light on the brand world and get brand back on the table, get brand back in the boardroom. And that's the vision and the mission for us, to drive this common language to help people measure, grow, communicate brand, and build fantastic businesses. And 4 years on, that's where we're at.
Yeah, that's wild. Yeah.
Connor, how about you?
Yeah, I also did law and practiced as a lawyer for a number of years, and then I've got a few more gray hairs than Matt. You might be able to tell. And then kind of raised a fund, went the VC route, and launched Auckland, New Zealand's first accelerator program, and got a view into what startups were, and fell in love with kind of B2B SaaS as a model, and then joined this company Mishguru with Matt. We joined on the same day, and then took off to different countries to scale it up. Cool. And then have always been a brand lover. And then when we came back to New Zealand 4 years ago, we both just were like, the cookie apocalypse was starting to happen. Yeah. Attribution was difficult. And we were just like a little bit obsessed about how this short-term slot machine of Meta and Google was no longer, the right thing for brands to do. And then the deeper you dive into it, the more it just makes sense. You're like, oh, well, okay, people shouldn't beat themselves up for focusing on that for 10, 15 years, because you literally could put $1 in a slot machine and get $3 back. Like, that's great. Everyone should do that. But then if that doesn't work, what is the new source of truth? Totally. And I think that's what we got excited about. And initially it was for growth companies, because enterprise companies have a brand tracking solution. The huge incumbent market research firms exist, and those are great products. And as we started building, we realized that, you could productize a lot of that research, and you could make it communicable and easy to use, which is essentially, that's the problem at the end of the day, is that marketers don't have a seat at the table. Right. And so marketers know about thinking long-term. They know you have to build brand as well as do performance, but they kind of just have been beaten over the head for 20 years for clicks and revenue. And if they get a chance to show and be able to measure correctly the top of funnel, and just like by measuring correctly, just getting it into people's minds, being able to explain the 95-5 rule, being able to explain the long and short of it, being able to explain and educate the board on why future demand and existing demand are both important. That's the job to be done. And so making Tracksuit as communicable and easy to interpret as possible, no black boxes. We ask 1,000 people if they're aware of you, and we tell you what percentage say they are. And that's, the board can get behind that, and they know they need to invest in it. So, our vision has grown as Tracksuit has grown, because we've realized that problem exists in enterprise boardrooms and mid-market and growth companies. So, so we're happy. It's been a wild ride for 4 years, and it's exciting.
Yeah. No, I'm also genuinely excited for you guys to be here, because there's a lot of things that I think Mark and I want to kind of get into. But you said something there, Connor, that kind of triggered something for me. And I told you, we're going to meander. Like the outlines, we're going to toss it out of the window. We're the meanders over here. But you talked about the cookie deprecation, that the cookie apocalypse or whatever. And it's interesting to think that we're still in this place where the cookies now still exist, but you have this notion that consumers are deprecating the cookie on their own, right? If you think about all the pop-up banners and things like that, then now you either have to provide consent for the cookies to follow you. How do you think we're going to continue to evolve, or what is that I guess that relationship and how measurement's going to be affected? Because we know a lot of the measurement was coming from cookies, but as consumers continue to deprecate on their own, even though Google is not deprecating it now in their browsers, how do you think that dichotomy is going to work as we continue to press forward?
I think there's a ton of focus on connecting the dots between kind of brand and performance, and that is going to persist. And I don't think the answer is going to arrive the perfect answer is not going to arrive anytime soon. And so where I tend to exist, and Matt, I'd love for you to give your version of this answer as well, because it could be a little bit different, but where I tend to exist, I believe in simplicity and, like, again, just making things easy to communicate. And when you try to pretend that there's a perfect answer, that measurement and attribution are perfect, I think you get caught out as a marketer. And like my job, our job, I think at Tracksuit is to help marketers have a seat at the table and kind of be like high integrity individuals, to be able to say, this is what we think is going to happen, and hopefully make that happen. And so if you're pretending like this black box is going to be perfect with attribution, and actually it ends up at 150% of revenue, and you're like, no, you can't be a high integrity individual, and you lose your seat at the table. And so I tend to say the answer is not perfect, and it's going to be really hard to track and attribute perfectly. But what we do know two things: that if all of these actual numbers at the bottom of the funnel are going up and to the right, that's good. That's short-term growth. That's capturing existing demand. And if the numbers at the top of the funnel, awareness, consideration, preference, and brand sentiment, are all going in the right direction, if those two things are true, you don't necessarily have to connect the dots right now. And hopefully one day we will be able to connect the dots. And I promise you, we're working on it with some partners. But if you can't connect the dots perfectly, then maybe don't try. Make sure these are going in the right direction, and make sure those are going in the right direction. And you'll be growing tomorrow, and you'll be growing in 6 months if that's the case.
Do you have any other thoughts on that, Matt?
It was a couple of years ago when this was all coming out, and a good friend of mine is the global head of social media at a large food delivery company. I'll let you take a guess at which one or which ones those might be. But we were walking through the English countryside. We were 7 of us. And he was explaining it like this: with the way that the tracking and cookies changed. There were 7 of us walking through the English countryside, and he was telling the other group that we were with, and he said, with the way that consumers can opt in to being tracked, we focus on, let's say there's 2 people in this group. 2 people in this group allow us to track you. But there's 5 others we have no idea about. But because we've got tracking and visibility, there's this gravity to try to target and build everything off the 2 people we know, and you're ignoring the other 5. And like, that doesn't make sense at all.
Yeah.
And so connecting the dots, that's one signal to take. How do you get an objective read of the full market? That's where we fit in with Tracksuit, objective market brand tracking. You go down to social listening, right? Ethan Decker, a great marketing science lead here in Denver or in Colorado. He did this great talk at South by Southwest a couple of years ago. And it was a full room, a full auditorium, and he was talking about Nike. And Nike launched a new campaign on TikTok. See, there are 174 million households in the US that own a pair of Nike. Great. All right, we started 104 million. I might have the numbers slightly wrong, but let's start there. The latest TikTok campaign had 4 million views.
Yeah.
Okay, 4 million people out of 174 million households that own a pair of Nike. It had 174 comments. If you are only focusing on the comments on TikTok, you're listening to 174 people out of 174 million. And he threw this little black t-shirt into the corner of this auditorium. He's like, if you're only looking at social listening, it's like listening to that t-shirt in the corner of the room right here. And I tie that back to if you're only looking at, the cookies and the tracking, you're missing the market. And so as Connor said, connect the dots, paint the full picture, but it's never going to be perfect.
Yeah.
And now a short word from our sponsor. This episode was sponsored by Quadical. Did I say that right? Quadical?
You did. Quadical. Yeah.
Quadical. Mark, what is it?
Well, V, I'm glad you asked. Quadical is my own company, actually. So, I'm the Sleeping Barber Podcast co-host with you, but I also have my own company. And so I'm happy to sponsor the Sleeping Barber Podcast.
Love that.
Because I give so much time to it. But Quadical is a fractional marketing leadership firm where we specialize in evidence-based marketing. And we do consulting work for companies typically between $30 to $300 million and helping them navigate some of the challenges that people have, like, I know something's broken, but I'm not quite sure how to fix it, nor do I have the time to fix it. And so that's where we help out a lot of people.
Well, I'll speak for Mark as well, because you're wearing your Quadical hat right now. We appreciate your sponsorship of the Sleeping Barber Podcast. And for all those that may be interested, we do have a whole bunch of sponsorship options. Always looking to bring on new sponsors. We have a lot of creative ideas that can really help across a global audience.
Thanks, V.
No, thank you, Quadical. We appreciate your business.
And now back to the show. Yeah, as much as cool as the tech is, I think that's something that's a bit of a trap for all of us. Like, oh, look at this new shiny object. Amazing. And then we think it's real. Like, we don't even know that we're only looking at 2 of the 5 people. We just, in a lot of cases, we just know that we're tracking people and like, look how cool this is. But there's that a general awareness that of the misgivings or the shortcomings that we're not really privy to, because the companies that are often promoting that kind of technology aren't really coming out with information about that. So, yeah, it's interesting.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Oh no, I was just gonna. I think it's important to note that it doesn't take anything away from any of those tools. Like, a lot of those it's deeply important to figure out which channels, to come up with a hypothesis about which channels are working best for a marketer, and to use the 2 people out of the 5. I think where we tend to sit, and I just wanted to sort of clarify this so we weren't, taking anything away from anyone, is just that you also have to be honest about missing the 5, and then have a look at the broader market and the broader category, and come up with another hypothesis about how you're showing up within that. Sorry to interrupt.
It's a great point. Hey, I did want to ask you about, like, with the tracker, we were joking around about tracksuits and sweatsuits at the beginning. I mean, it's part of branding, of your branding specifically. But I did want to ask, as a startup, there's this playbook that I think happens a lot of times, and I do some consulting with startup community here, and especially in the B2B side. And there's this idea of, like, constantly focused on low funnel or in market people, and capture all of the demand that you can, and gate stuff and do all that kind of stuff. And there's rarely this awareness that you could even do awareness. Broadly speaking, it's kind of, or if there is, then it's just wasteful. So as startup founders, running your own business, I wonder how you use, like, the theories around and the ideas around Tracksuit and what you sell for your own business, and how that influences some of the decisions around marketing your company.
Yeah, don't tell everyone. This is our advantage. Just please.
We have a pretty big audience, so you may want to keep it to yourself.
No, I mean, this is part of our belief. Like, we've drunk the Kool-Aid. We believe in awareness, and that is not only true for consumer businesses. Like, it's more true often for B2B, because the decision is you've got to be in that consideration set. Otherwise, you're not even close. And so, raising our own awareness. One of the things that I often think about is, like, if you are a lecturer at a university and you teach a brand course, get in touch. We will give you dashboards for free to help your students, like, look and pay attention to and learn about interpreting brand data.
Incredible.
And, like, if you think about that as a future demand play for us, like, these are people that hopefully will enter the marketing sphere in the next 5 years, and maybe be a business decision maker in a marketing team in the next 10. And we want to be in that consideration set. So it makes sense for us. It also furthers our goal of being the common language to measure and communicate brand, the more people that are fluent in a Tracksuit dashboard. So so that's one example that we think about. And we've done that a fair bit. And then running events. I think the belief that as AI gets more prolific, one of the main moats you can have is brand and community. So, investing in our own brand and our own community and credibility and trust is very important as well.
I'll have to ask you about that data dashboard for schools and stuff. That'd be great. I'll talk to you about that after.
Yeah.
Matt, anything else you want to add there?
I mean, 4 years ago, we linked up with our founding partner, James Herman, who is a leader in the world of effectiveness strategy planning. And so a lot of what is baked into Tracksuit and how we show up is embedded and comes from the fundamentals of effectiveness principles. And a lot of, James Herman's world. We are also fortunate to have Mark Ritson invest in our seed round. Like, we live and breathe the world of brand strategy, planning, effectiveness, and marketing science. And for us as a startup, we said we want to do the opposite of the playbook. What's the playbook been? The playbook has been raise venture money, spend it on growth marketing, put $1 in, get $3 out for 15 years. Yahoo! We are rocking and rolling. Like, let's go. But then what happens, right? Warby Parkers, Allbirds, Casper Matt, like, there was just there's that sweet spot of incredible brands that hit that plateau. Why did they hit that plateau? Because they weren't building brands and that long-term thinking at the same time as focusing on those sales and activations. And that was driven by, it was easy to measure performance marketing. It turned marketing and advertising and brand building into clicks, impressions, CPMs, CAC, like whatever the term you want to use. That was the focus, because non-marketers and marketers could understand dots and decimal places, and okay, we've got a common language now to speak. But it was at the expense of the longer term brand building. Eventually you exhaust those people in your pool, the existing demands. How do you build the future demands? You're 95 of people who aren't ready to buy from you right now. And so, that's what we really wanted to prove ourselves, as well as, the brands that we're working with, how to do both.
Via, I just want to throw one more question in, just because it as much as the platforms are forcing, or not forcing, that's not the right way to say it, offering performance level data. And we kind of, like, because there's so much of it, you're kind of drawn to that and driven to showing performance data, lower funnel tactics, that kind of thing. There's also the thing around investments and investors that are also following this playbook going, I want to see the CAC. I want to see, like, and so it's almost a double, like a left-right 1-2 punch combo kind of thing, because they're both saying the same thing. And so it's a bit of a, I imagine if you're not even using private equity, it's harder to go down the path you guys chose. Is that true, do you think?
Well, we bootstrapped for the first 2 years. So instead of spending money on the bottom of funnel, we bought a bunch of tracksuits and sent them to everybody with the money raised from revenue.
So you're operating in the red out of the gates.
Yeah. Payroll was tough that week, but we had tracksuits, so that was cool.
Yeah, and so great ones
but then
too.
You're right. That allowed us to do it a little bit differently, and then by the time we raised, we had product market fit, we had some, flywheels turning, and if you've made it work, then people don't question you, or you at least have the, I don't know, in New Zealand we say mana. You have the ability to sort of say, hey, what's working is working. If you tell me to dump this money in the bottom of the funnel, we're not doing it. And they're like, okay. And you also get to choose investors that are aligned with your values rather than going with your hat out to everybody and taking what you can get. But I think this applies to us, but also Matt and I, we spend a lot of time talking to like consumer VCs and private equity funds, not necessarily for raising investment ourselves, but, in order to try and make sure everyone understands this story. Like those funds, those VCs, those PE firms, a lot of them have felt this pain the most. Like it was actually their money that was being put into the slot machines. Mm-hmm. And so like when they look at their portfolios, they're saying, what happened over the last 20 years? And then you hand them a copy of Future Demand by James Herman. You talk them through the 95.5. You talk them through, all these principles. And a lot of the time, maybe they heard it in their like business school class once, and then they got seduced by the short-term metrics and forgot all about it. But, again, an offer to the audience is that Matt and I will come and do a talk at any boardroom. You're trying to convince your board about thinking long-term. You're trying to talk to your VCs or raise money, and they're just saying, oh, you got to do this, this, and this. It's, because it's not actually how you build great businesses, and the principles are, the science is there. As long as you can begin, bringing that education to the forefront, people tend to buy in, because then they go look at it by themselves and they're like, oh man, yeah, this is true. I can't believe I didn't think about it. And the wave is going that way, that. So you have the kind of support of a bunch of blogs that are being written by growth marketers, recovering performance marketers, as you called it. Who are all saying, we'll
talk about brand that in a second.
Brand is a growth lever, and we forgot about it, and it's back. So let's go.
Yeah, no, I love what you're saying there, Connor. But also, Matt, earlier on, you talked about, being rooted in marketing effectiveness principles and things like that. And one thing Mark and I are experiencing, even today, the percentage of marketers that are familiar, even about the rudimentary or like what we would call maybe foundational effectiveness principles, are still not common language. And I find that we're struggling as an industry when you still have a lot of the old way, I'm using air quotes here, the old way of thinking of marketing that prioritize loyalty first and things to that effect, where now we're saying a completely different thing. Like loyalty is a byproduct of like heavy category buyer, right? It's not so much loyal to a product, for example. So I'd love, Matt, if you can kind of dive into like, what are you seeing? Are you seeing a shift to effectiveness principles, or do you still think we have a long way to go as apostles of this way of thinking, if you will? Because I feel like we're still not there. Like it's not widely adopted yet.
That last point, I think, is the wide adoption is what we're really driving towards. We look at the principles and they go back, 50, 60 years, and the principles are the same, right? It's like, okay, yes, consumers behave slightly differently. Yes, there are different channels. Yes, there is a multitude of different ways you can connect with audiences, but it comes back to the fundamental principles. And if there are two courses I can recommend for any marketer, brand builder, strategist, person in this world that you need to look at, one is the Masters of Advertising Effectiveness by James Herman, and the other is the Mini Marketing MBA by Mark Ritson.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You do either of those courses, two of those courses, you are fully skilled up in a way that empowers you internally in a common language, simplified, to take to your business, to take to your agencies, to say, all right, here we go. Like, this is how we make it relevant. So it's a training and education piece as well. And we all need to be aware and privy of always needing to learn and develop. But there are some, rooted in old school principles. We want to make it relevant for the modern day. Like, what are the 2026 examples of great brands doing this? And they're out there now. Liquid Deaths, Duolingos. There are more of these brands who are winning in the eyes of marketers and brand builders, but it's rooted in old school thinking. And that's amazing to see.
It's so exciting that we get to see more creative marketing coming back into the fold, Like, I think it's such a great time. And on your question exactly, though, I went to a talk by Marc in New York last year, and I can't remember exactly how he got the stats, but he might have scraped LinkedIn for everyone with marketing in their title and then looked at how many people had been trained in marketing, like they'd done a marketing degree or done a course. And it was something, this is in the US or maybe in North America, it was something like 23 or 27% of people with marketing in their title had any training in marketing. And so I guess the thing to take away from that is, if you can do one of these courses, or if you are a marketing effectiveness trained marketer and you have that mindset, it is a huge advantage right now. And if you look at job boards, people are hiring more brand titles. People are looking at full funnel marketing. Right now, that is a way to have an advantage in the market. One of the most popular events we ran for Tracksuit was an International Women's Day female CMO and female grad speed dating event. And this is in New Zealand, which is a small market, and 180 people turned up to this thing. And they were all just brand-minded marketers who, were associated with the Tracksuit ecosystem and are thinking long-term and want to be involved with brands that think long-term and are investing in creative marketing. And I think that's really exciting. I think the growth marketers were really cool for a while, and now creativity is coming back in. Yeah. And so now you're going to see the creatives getting hired. You're going to see more creative directors at every company, and leaning into, again, with AI becoming more prominent, human creativity then has to sit on top of that. At least we all hope. And so, that's a great place to be.
I'll caveat by saying you need both. You need great creative and brand people, and you also need great growth and performance people. It's not an and or.
Yeah.
It's a and.
Yeah.
And so leveling up the rock stars in the business across growth and brand, performance and brand, creative, whatever you want to call the split.
Yeah.
Yeah. I agree with that. Marc? Go ahead.
I was just saying, Marc, what was that new marketing? Was it called vibe marketing or vibe marketing?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. We're going to have a workshop on that.
I don't know if you both have heard of that.
It's this thing. So there's the way I'm internalizing it right now. I don't know tons and tons about it, but it's the idea of taking a 40-hour job and putting it in 40 minutes because of all the technology and tools and all that. And so the promise, or let's call it promise. The promise of vibe marketing is that you could replace a 10-person team with a single individual because of all the technology that's available. So predominantly just using AI agents to do all kinds of things. That's
a hot take, Marc.
Yeah, and so I think it's a version of like the agile world, and then the way project management was done before. And now there's vibe coders, as far as I understand, from a software engineering perspective. And so I think that adoption, or it's being migrated over into marketing. But we literally are going to run a workshop. And
are you? Okay.
Yeah. My interest on it is, like, we have a case study from the Effies, or Les Binet and Adam and Eve DVD with the McCain chips one. So we're going to modify that case study, but then have hopefully 3 groups of people where one group is just 1 or 2 people doing vibe marketing, trying to solve the brief, fictitious brief based off of that case study. One doing traditional prompts like half my advertising wasted, or not the loyalty thing, like loyalty growth comes from loyalty, having them use the sort of more traditional version. And then a third group, would all their prompts would be based off of the marketing effectiveness literature, and see who comes up with what. And then we've got the case study that we can reveal at the end to say, here's what they did in the real life, and here's some examples. But so much of that stuff is reminds me of that Dave Trott quote about shit that arrives at the speed of light is still shit. And I just don't know if that's going to be a good thing or a bad thing. I mean, the efficiency thing, I can see how it's so appealing to people, but I just don't know that being able to do more faster is always a better thing.
Or as some people like to say, Mark, poop in, poop out.
Yeah, totally.
And I think when you're running this workshop, like, you let us know, because something that we can offer at Tracksuit, and is why we are integrated and embedded in the agency world, strategists, planners, is like, there's the 4 C's, right? The 4 C's of brand strategy. What's happening in culture, what's happening in the category, what's happening for the client's brands, and what's happening for the competitor set.
Mm-hmm.
Like, everybody should have some sort of framework around the 4 C's. What Tracksuit can give you is visibility on the category, visibility on the client's brands, and visibility on the competitor set. And those are fundamental input metrics that should be going into any of the work, whether you're vibe marketing, whether you're traditional marketing. Like, you have to have that. And so when you run this workshop, when you've got this teams, we will feed and give access to category, brands, competitor sets to inform those hypotheses about what you're going to do. Because old mate Mark Zuckerberg last week coming out with Meta's play, and I read that, and something I feel very passionately about is around the creative and communication that a brand is putting out in the world needs to be true to the brands, but also needs to be what consumers expect from the brand or category.
Yeah.
What I mean by that is that if you are on TikTok, if you're a brand on TikTok and you are just posting dance videos and you're saying, why is this not driving results? We can tell you that, consumers in your category expect your brand to have better perceptions around the quality. Mm-hmm. Why don't you use that insight to inform the creative and the communication and how you're showing your brand up on the right channels? Because then we drive better effectiveness, we drive better results, confidence increases, budgets increases, better brands and better businesses get built. But if you're missing the inputs about what should we even be doing, or what's the job to be done for our brands, or where are we missing the mark with consumers, we're setting up for failure. And I think too many brands and agencies are setting themselves up for failure, not generating the results that they held themselves to. And everybody goes, why did that not work?
Yeah. Yeah. The creative part, I think, is so interesting. And when you talked about that earlier too, Connor, especially in B2B, where I feel like it's all been about feature benefit for a long time. And the idea, like, there's the Kantar work around with Paul Dyson on how important creative is, and how we misunderstand the importance of it in general. Like, to me, creative is actually one of the best targeting tools that we could ever possibly invest in. And so it's just interesting thinking about brand in terms of the creative messaging being the targeting tool. I think that it's a very intentional process. I know creatives would be going, yeah, duh, no kidding. But for people that aren't in the creative space like me, they haven't grown up in that. It there's a recent epiphany, I'd say that I find it so fascinating.
I think that comes down. I mean, I'm sure that comes down to a lot of things, but where my mind goes is like getting into the consideration set and how like creative creates, an emotional bond often, like good creative creates that emotional bond, which then draws you into the consideration set for that buyer. And I think we did a bit of a study with our own data called the case for consideration, which we've presented around a few places, and that maybe across 5,000 plus brands and 600 categories or something, we looked at how many brands were in the consideration set for each one of those respondents, and the average was 2 to 3 brands in every consideration set. And so something like snack foods, it was 5. And I think one of the ones that was really interesting with pet food was like 1. And the average was 2 to 3. And so, and B2B, I would imagine, is actually closer to the 1 to 2. I think that someone's done a study where, like, more often than not, more than 50% of the time, the B2B choice, the software choice, is the first one that was looked at. And I think so emotional creative advertising is what connects people to a brand, and then you enter that consideration set because you are emotionally connected and aligned. And that's what's new. It's not new. That's very old, but it is coming back in vogue.
Yeah,
right. And what people are paying attention to, and then it turns up as a performance lever, right? Because because then, whether those people are coming into the funnel in a month or 2 months or 2 years, you've created that future demand. And if you stay in touch with them, then you see more like sales in the existing demand because you've increased the size of the pool.
Yeah. I want to ask you about that because we haven't even talked about all the amazing work you guys have been publishing in the reports and all that, but just to dovetail on what you're talking about, one of them, I'm trying to remember, I have a screenshot of the picture. I can't remember if it's from which report, the awareness report maybe, but advertising performance efficiency. So there's a few things I find super interesting about that, where you've got awareness and investment and then in conversions. So between awareness, like low, medium, high, I'd love for you to talk about that, but also that it's with TikTok is fascinating to me because we were talking about the channels themselves as being, having been in this place where we can measure performance, we're going to puke data on performance, and I'm not saying in a bad way about TikTok, but there's just so much data. And now we've got these brands like TikTok doing work with you, and Meta's producing other similar reports, and I've seen MailChimp with a report like that, and Google's got Meridian coming out. Like, maybe you could figure out how you want to, Matt, maybe talk about one of the points about what, like, the platform's investment in brand, and then Connor, if you talk about the report findings on performance efficiency.
Yeah, totally. I think it's in media platform and channels' interest to drive better results and see budget continuing to increase. So whether it's Meta, whether it's TikTok, whether it's out-of-home providers, they are trying to build sustained businesses themselves. And what we see is that if all consumer brands or all brands are just focusing on conversion metrics, at some point they are going to exist the demands they have, and results are going to start going the other way, and not in a good way. And so for this, it's around these channels like TikTok, Meta, and YouTube, and Google are all looking at and have the proof to say, our channels, you can build brand on TikTok, you can build brand on YouTube. It's not necessarily traditional versus modern channels, but how do you start to increase the performance of performance marketing? A great lever to do that is brand building. The better you build your brands, the better your performance marketing tomorrow. And so we work with TikTok as one of the partners, and that was the awareness, the awareness advantage report, which you can go and have a look at. The year before that, we also did the same study comparing Amazon e-commerce data with increasing brand awareness and the growth efficiency that you see in scaling both. And I'll let Connor speak to a couple of the specifics that came out of those reports. But it's it's the same, and it's the same on each channel, which again, it's the old school principles. Build your brands, increase your performance marketing efficiencies across the board.
Yeah, old school principles on the new channels is essentially where we're lucky enough to exist and be able to do those reports. And I think the high level stuff around brand, ironically, having a very bad brand in the boardroom, and being able, and that slowly changing, and all of these companies, these media platforms have known that you kind of can build brand on them, but it just hasn't been popular. It hasn't been the focus. And now it is becoming popular because it is a growth lever, because the data, they're paying attention to the marketing effectiveness and marketing science teachings and principles. And so they're returning back to that. And that's a way for them to keep spend going up, because it does work. And so, yeah, that's where they're coming from. And it's great to see, because then you get better marketing. Then you get more creative coming through and less kind of clickbait type marketing. And that's exciting for everybody. And the actual results in the awareness advantage, my favorite result is a brand that is 4 out of 10 people aware of a brand versus 3 out of 10 people aware of a brand. The 4 out of 10 brand converts into revenue 43% better than the 3 out of 10 brand.
Wow. That's crazy.
Which is a huge difference.
Yeah.
And so that just shows how, correlated awareness and revenue are. And the flip side, throughout the entire, every increase in awareness, the increase in conversion is huge. The biggest jump is sort of between that kind of 3 and 5 out of 10 range. And the other like fascinating thing that came out of that report was that clicks and awareness have no correlation. So you can create very clickable ads, and that has no correlation to awareness. And therefore, if awareness is highly correlated to revenue, then the clicks are not that correlated to revenue. And so awareness and revenue are the most correlated, have the highest correlation, which I think is just something that marketers need to be aware of.
Yeah.
If I can jump in and just clear up that awareness advantage stat so that we've got that right.
I was saying like 3 out of 10, 5 out of 10, 2 out of 10.
700% increase.
Yeah, we can edit this, can't we? So the awareness advantage we did with TikTok showed that brands with high awareness, over 60%, had nearly 3 times better conversion rates than lower awareness brands at 20%. And so the better you build your awareness, the better your conversion rates scale.
Yeah.
Connor talked about click-through rate is not a proxy for brand awareness.
Yeah.
The year before, when we looked at the Amazon data, ROAS does not determine how efficiently you can grow your business either. Right. And so here are a couple of the proxy measurements, which we know aren't the right proxies, which is why you've got to connect the dots across the board.
Yeah,
Mark, I know you had another point there.
No, I'm just like, but because it's so much about. I do. I mean, I got all kinds of things, but like so much about I did this forever. Like I optimize a whole bunch of things for ROAS, optimize a whole bunch of things for clicks instead of reach. Let's say instead of the creative impact, because I just didn't have a tool to measure it. So now with data like that, it's kind of like a bit of a slap in the face, not in a bad way, but just like an eye-opening kind of moment in a lot of ways around how do we optimize campaigns And are we optimizing for the right thing? Even though like people want the CAC, people want the CPC, they want the, all the low kind of things, but it actually isn't necessarily driving the thing what they really want, which is the revenue and the profit.
Yeah, but again, they're both important. So they complement each other. You can't do one without the other. And so I think, making sure we talk about brand a lot, and that's not actually to take away from growth. It's just to make sure that brand now has a seat at the table.
Yeah.
Because performance is going to continue. You have to capture that existing demand, and you have to compete hard to win. If there's 5% that's available at any given time, then you have to be out competing your competitors to capture more of that 5%. It just so happens that if you invest in brand well and you build your brand over time and you optimize, those investments for awareness, consideration, preference, and brand sentiment, and you pay attention to those metrics, then you are definitely going to have an advantage when trying to capture the 5%. And you're also going to grow the pool to be bigger.
Mm-hmm.
The one thing, as a reformed performance marketer, the one thing that I think about a little bit in this new renaissance, if you will, of brand, is in performance marketing, there was almost like a way you could calculate a finite investment that you needed, right? There's only so much intent in the market that you need to capitalize against. So when it came to things like budgets and making a case for money, of course, you always try to get as much as possible, but there was a cap, and you could find that cap based in your category and things like that. Now, as we're shifting to more winning back the hearts and minds of consumers, that requires larger investments on the brand building side. Has there been a point where you've been able to identify a diminishing return in those investments where you would say, you know what, you can't be reaching everybody. You have to find that cap and then kind of work behind that. In any of the research, have been able to identify that? Maybe, Matt, we can help us out with that.
Yeah, I mean, for sustained long-term growth, brand is always going to be important. And so it's looking at the stage of business that you're in, the category that you're in, and what is those budget splits to be able to optimize for the job to be done. We have a calculator on our website, tracksuit.com, which takes the science and the research of Burnett and Field, and you can plug it in to see what is, based on theory and practice and the science, like what should our split between brand or performance or brand and sales activation be?
Right.
And so in terms of the efficiency of growth, yes, there's going to be caps on your efficiency and the scaling of that. But if you're McDonald's, you don't need to increase awareness.
Right.
But you might have to continue fighting for consideration.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And so how do you do that? Whereas if you're a 20% awareness brand and you scale that to a 60% awareness brand, you're going to see 3 times better conversion rates. And so it takes budget and time and consistency to keep winning the hearts and minds, because unfortunately your consumers or your audience isn't thinking about your brand every single day.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you look at, Byron Sharp, a mental and physical availability, it's like when someone thinks about or needs to get what you offer, are you available and are you in the minds? And so how do you optimize to be doing both of those? And that is, again, that's brand and performance optimizing, but there are different objectives to do. There are different jobs to be done.
And different measurements and reasons to protect both sides.
Totally.
Yeah. And even if you're at 96, 98% awareness, you can't sleep on it. Like you've seen all of the kind of press about how Nike's been changing over the years and how they're returning to brand and returning to focus on their core propositions and like individual sports. And, and I think that is an example of, reaching a point where people kind of believed there was diminishing returns on investments. So then hyper optimizing at the bottom of funnel and then, but forgetting a little bit about the top. and then you see the repercussions of that a few years on. And amazing brand, one of the best in the world, love them, and so glad to see that they are kind of returning back to their principles and where they started.
It's going to be an uphill battle, though. Like they left a gap in the market that was filled very quickly by other products. I think we can talk about Hoka, On, and what Brooks made a resurgence, for God's sake. Like that's stuff you would buy as a kid, at least for me, that you never wanted to wear. But anyways, it's I think Nike's in a really interesting position, and I think it's like a case study developing here in front of us as a discipline to showcase like how long is it going to take for Nike to come back now to reignite that passion for sport the way that they had. And they were the brand that epitomized performance. It's hard. Yeah. I don't know if they're that anymore. I would love to see how they are able to come back through brand building likely and things like that.
Just real quick, I forgot to ask you guys at the beginning, do you have a hard stop now?
Checking. Nope. Let's go. Keep rolling.
I got circa 10 minutes max. Then I got to go prep for my talk. So,
okay.
Do you want to stat on Nike?
Sure.
Right. So let's have a look here. So we've been talking about the Nike, the awareness consideration. When we look in the data in the past 3 months compared to the 3-month period before that, Nike has successfully increased the conversion of people aware of them to who would consider purchasing them by 3 percentage points.
Okay.
So that's a 6-month swing, right? Wow. And that's a big brand. But shifting conversion by 3 percentage points, like they're turning it around. Mm-hmm. And so that's the challenge. Yes, you have these other brands that have popped up and taken the space, but creative consistency and creative spend and showing up, you got to fight against big budgets and brands like Nike who have survived more than 1 or 2 tariffs and recessions and uncertainties out there in the world. And so we're keeping a really close eye on it.
That's really interesting. We've got about 10 minutes left, so I know there's probably 800 other questions we can ask you. So maybe at some point we'll have to, if you guys are interested, we'd love to have you back and chat about some more of the reports and the findings that you've got.
Let's do it.
I'll just ask this one. In terms of brand, you've got, again, there's so many great publications you got. There's one around emotion and Entertain or Die. Those two actually, I think I both kind of pulled some similar ideas out of there. But you mentioned Liquid Death, Duolingo before. There's emotion in the sense of like, when we're looking for an optimal sort of emotion to tap into, for a long time, it felt like, especially when there was the purpose era, like everything had to make you cry and give you the feels. And I don't know that that's totally, like there's such a bigger playbook for emotion. And I just wonder if you can talk about some of those different tools that are available.
Absolutely. Creative is such an important metric, as we've talked about, and plenty of people on your podcast have talked about, is creative. And whether we look at the report that we did, the emotion effect, if you look at the work from System 1, if you look at the work from Ipsos, there's been this swing around building brands that people have positive emotions toward. Mm-hmm. You can drive positive emotion towards your brands. You are driving far better results over the long term and the short term. And so whether that's humor, like a Liquid Death or a Duolingo, whether that's just positive emotions elsewhere, I really like the work from Progressive and Dr. Rick speaking to, insurance, speaking to the different types of personas in there. It makes you feel good, and it's like, it's relevant. And I can see myself and people like me, in the first home buying situation. And so we probably a swing from tear jerking into creating positive emotions, building familiarity with your brand. And when people come into the market, they're going to gravitate towards those brands that they feel more familiar with. And humor is a great way of doing that. Liquid Death, Duolingo, some great examples of who's doing that really well.
There was that Ipsos report, I think, that, talked about those. It was surprise, empathy, excitement, happiness, and curiosity. Those were the 5 kind of positive things that drew people into that consideration set. And I know that from our research, it's often, like Matt said, one of the things we ask about a lot of categories and brands is for people to select is for people like me. Is this brand for people like me? And that is always one of the top reasons someone might convert from awareness through to preference or consideration. And I think that, happiness and alignment are just so important. And again, that is done through creative, effective work, usually not through clicks.
Yeah.
It's later this morning. I'm actually doing a presentation on the cost of doll, and I'm sure you're all kind of familiar with the research on that side from what Adam Morgan, System 1, etc. And I recall, like, as a part of that research, obviously they talk about 50% of ads are no better than cows munching on a field, right? Then when they tested the system, which is, again, for me a really large eye opener. But they mentioned that the most common emotion elicited from today's ads is neutrality, which that doesn't bode well, because what we know is, like, when consumers don't feel anything, they don't do anything. So I'd love to understand a little bit on your take on this, and maybe, Connor, we can kick off with you. Is why has there been this large shift to the sea of sameness, or a lot of beige advertising in the market that lacks that emotion that we know can create that stickiness and that the proper growth metrics that we need?
Yeah, Matt, I'd love for some of your support on this, but I think, like, what you did see the sea of, like, the bland brands coming through over the last 15 years, and that was just part of it. Was what people thought was effective, because I think it got a lot of clicks. Like, it actually did optimize for something, and it optimized for a lot of those performance metrics. And then if you have been a brand that is optimized around those things, then you see that flowing through into your other media channels. But there was an ad I saw someone shared on LinkedIn today for, like, a UK natural gas company that brought back mascots, and and I think that those funny, humorous, interesting, driving curiosity type of ads are what will win going forward. And it kind of comes back to this, how many people are trained in marketing, how many people have these effectiveness principles behind them, and that they will utilize those principles in creating effective ads, and that will drive companies forward. And so companies should be hiring those people, and then they should be empowering them to create ads with those principles behind them, and then they should be winning an outsized share of their market until everyone adopts it.
Right.
Matt, did you have anything you want to add to that?
Oh, we absolutely love the cost of dull that came out.
Yeah.
It was, and I think, when we our friends over at System 1, it's a really important part is test your work to see how it, to improve the success and the likelihood that you are going to shift an action from people, and that you're not finding this middling of the road. And then where we sit in is around, okay, what's the impact of that over the short, medium, and long term?
Yeah.
And that is, and that's where, yes, we're in the world of measurement, but you still got to look at marketing and brand as a mix of art and science.
Yeah.
And if you're only looking at the data and you're looking at the averages and you're middling of the road and you're doing everybody else,
benchmarking,
you're going to be like everybody else, right?
Yeah.
And that's where you see the sea of sameness and the cost of dull is because everybody's just middling. Everybody's just looking at the averages. So how do you look for those pieces on the outsides? How do you really find what makes your brands
The fringes,
differentiated, but differentiated in a way that's relevant to your potential, customer segments in a way that is more relevant than what your competitors are doing. If people haven't seen the cost of dull or read the report or seen the cows munching grass, like it is just that again. What we love about that is it's simplifying this concept down into something that people go, "Oh, wow, like, that makes a lot of sense." So yeah, pairing it up, find those edges. It's a mix of art and science. Otherwise, we're middling, and that's not great for anybody.
And it's very
creative,
similar to Oh, sorry. You go ahead.
No, go ahead, Connor.
Oh, I mean, it is similar to what we saw in that Entertainer Die report we did with Small World, and brand love and memory had little to no correlation with top performers, but capturing attention and driving engagement was correlated to top performers. And I think that speaks to the same idea.
Yeah. This is honestly such an awesome conversation, and really appreciate your time today going through all this stuff and entertaining the questions that we had and kind of digging into all these rabbit holes. It's awesome conversation. Thank you.
How
can people find out more about you guys and the work you're doing and Tracksuit, and even where the great tracksuits might be if they wanted to do a retro order?
We do need to get a swag store on our website, but website tracksuit.com, pretty easy to find. And go stalk Matt on LinkedIn because he's really smart and will share lots of things about all his favorite brands.
Perfect. Thank you for that. Hey, it's been a pleasure, guys. It's been a pleasure. Awesome. If we can help with those university or brand management papers, sing out. Mark, when you do your vibe marketing, let us know. And finally, if you're an apparel brand that wants to collaborate on making absolutely phenomenal tracksuits, let me know.
2026 drop. The race is on.
That's right. I'm looking for collaborations.
Me and Matt still do a lot of the designs on the tracksuits, so that's the favorite part of the gig.
Amazing.
Thanks,
guys.
This was great.
All right.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
If you like this show, please leave a review. And even if you didn't, we'd love to make this show better, and your feedback will help us do that. Post Pod.
It's the Post Pod with Marc and V. Woohoo! The crowd goes wild. Oh, that's what we're going to hear at Cannes, aren't we? All the time.
All the time.
Red carpets.
Adoring fans. It's going to be awesome.
Oh, so good.
Yeah. So good. Sure, we'll take a picture with you. Yep.
Yes, okay.
No
Do you want me to sign that shirt? I can sign that for you.
Just randomly start signing people's shirts.
Bring our own markers.
That'd be awesome.
Yeah. But we're here to talk about something else, aren't we?
We are. We're talking about Connor and Matt from Tracksuit.
Well, first of all, I love the tracksuits. I think that's such a
so good
distinctive brand asset if we want to use the right terminology here, but it makes it a lot of fun. They were great. What a great conversation.
Yeah. That's a funny story, but I think it was Matt maybe who said that he was wearing an Adidas tracksuit at the office.
Totally. But he's like open to sponsorships. Like no worries.
Yeah.
That was so good.
What were some of the takeaways you had?
You know the power of three? I love the power of three. So there were three things. Brand is more than a logo. It's a long game. Creativity and community trump clicks. And the third was measurement, mindset, and the marketing seat. Mm-hmm. Let's dive quickly into and this is a no-brainer for a lot of marketers out there. I know this, but sometimes it's good to repeat. Brand is more than a logo. It's a long game. There was that recent study done by System 1, the idea of compound creative.
Yep.
Kind of builds over time. But, both Connor and Matt really talked about that as well. Like, especially on the B2B side, like brand awareness is especially critical. B2B ensures brands are even more considered in purchasing decisions. Understanding both current and future demand allows for more strategic brand planning. And then, we were talking about the startups, the startup world a little bit. And it's like bootstrapping gives founders greater control over brand direction and then long-term thinking as well. So just, again, let's not forget that we're not here just to drive short-term. We're here to drive long-term as well.
Yeah. I think I'm not on that note. I pushed a lot towards the brand tracking side. And I remember I would say they were the ones that were kind of saying, no, like, let's not throw out the baby with the bathwater. The lower funnel performance stuff is still super important.
Yeah.
And I think one of the takeaways after having re-listened to chunks of that podcast was there's a comment they had around whether it's brand or whether it's performance, you want to know what channels are doing the work.
Yeah.
So there's some element of that to using the measurement that you have available to you to have a guess or a hypothesis around which is the best channel to do those things. But both the outcomes are important. You want to do both the short and the long, which is not news for a lot of people, but it just is. There's a caution, I guess, around going all in on the other way, like going ditch to ditch, right?
Totally. Yeah. I love that. What else did I have there? We did talk about like performance marketing has been dominating a lot of marketing strategies, but there's that growing need to make sure that we're rebalancing the investments, which I think, again, it goes without saying. We've talked about endlessly like the 60-40 split as a rule of thumb.
Yeah.
Of course, every brand, every organization it's best that they do their own evaluation on what that right mix is.
Yeah.
But starting with something like that is not a terrible idea. And
I think there was also the comment around with measurements. They had that, I think it was Matt maybe that brought it up, where you could be measuring everything off of, say, 2 people, but there's actually 7 people in the market and you have no data on the other 5.
Yeah.
And so don't just blindly trust the data that you've got available to you, because assuming it's all accurate, it's directional at best.
Actually, let's go to measurement right now. And I love that they also, I think we reflected a little bit on our MBA that we did, and we talked a little bit about the lack of education around marketing effectiveness systems and those forums, and I guess we can only really speak for Canada, likely maybe more North America, where it's still not mainstay. Like, it's not something that a lot of marketers are talking about or spending time with. But if we think about the evolving ecosystems that the digital landscapes that we're forced to look at, these effectiveness principles almost become the way that you can start thinking about these in a more constructive way. And in absence of that, you can just go down these rabbit holes, if you will, especially if you're led by partners and things like that on specific tactics and things like to that effect, that you could be led down a path that's not actually driving profitability that you need for your business. So, making sure that those that likely listen to the podcast are already on the marketing effectiveness train, like as we are, is almost like serve as evangelists, if you will, in those spaces where, educate people with them, make sure you're spending time, because it just helps. Well, I would argue it helps everything that you do.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I actually am doing that vibe marketing workshop this week, and we recorded that a couple of weeks ago. Now we're fast forward a couple of weeks. Now we're doing the post pod, but magic of audio. But yeah, so we are doing that. I'm super excited to see what the results are going to be, because we're going to have one group that's going to use prompts that are based on marketing effectiveness, prompts that are based on another group with prompts based on more traditional stuff, and then another group that's just going to run vibe just to go fast. And I'm kind of curious to see if we'll be able to get good, fast, and cheap. I don't know if you can do all 3 still. Like, it'll be interesting.
Isn't it always like, I don't know, sometimes you go down those like Instagram reels, like there's three, if you want it fast, you have to pick three. So it's like
pick two, yeah.
Speed, quality, and cost.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you can only have 2 out of the 3. You can't have 3 out of 3 ever. So it's like if you want to prioritize cost and speed, then you're going to suffer on quality, for example. Or if you want to prioritize quality and cost, your time spent is going to be higher, right? So it's like, can you have all 3? I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah.
I'll be curious to see what
the effectiveness stuff
marketing
too.
Moment.
Totally. Yeah. The effectiveness stuff too. It's interesting. They were talking about, I think it was a study that Ritson had commented on or found anyway, about 24%, I think it was, is the number of marketers in the UK were professional or trained in marketing. I don't know that it's that different. Even Connor, I think, said that he was, if I'm not mixing up the two, but Connor had a legal degree.
Right.
And so, like, I had a science degree. Like, I don't know. There's not a lot of people in marketing that had training. And to your point, even if you did, especially if you're in North America, it was Kotler sort of
totally
fundamentals of marketing, which isn't a bad thing, but it's not the whole picture. And they haven't been updated for a long time. So,
no, exactly.
Yeah. So it's interesting hearing like all these principles and concepts and stuff, and the idea that if you're not investing just in your own betterment and understanding these tools and the systems and the theories and evidence that supports decision making, then you could just be blindly going about doing your day-to-day job without knowing whether or not it's actually all doing a good thing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
No, that's a great point. Okay, what else did we have here? Okay. I think this one goes without saying, aligning investor expectations with long-term brand strategy remains a persistent challenge, right? I think that's something that a lot of those individuals working in the startup setups, like, you're constantly fighting, right?
Yeah.
You know the importance of driving long-term brand growth, but at the same time, they need results in the moment. I would argue it's not even startups. Like, a lot of enterprise.
It's not,
it's everywhere. Like, but
I think with the startups, the thing is they have a runway.
That's true.
Because there's only a certain amount of cash until the next raise. And so you're looking at how do you prove the value in somebody investing in your company. And if you don't have more cash by the time the next raise comes around, you're kind of hooped. So it is the same thing. It's short-term pressure, like a large company, enterprise. You would have quarterly pressure, but there's a little bit more cash flow to carry you forward.
Mm-hmm. This is no, I agree, but I think this also comes back to why like a service like Tracksuit becomes important, because one of the sound bites, if I remember again correctly, is like brand tracking can bridge that gap between short-term performance metrics and long-term brand equity.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're not tracking it, it's hard for you to make the case for it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this is where, like, again, like a service like Tracksuit comes really handy, and making sure that you start somewhere where you can start building some of that.
Yeah, it's
that
a
knowledge.
thing. Yeah, like we did a survey for the Marketing Association, and one of the things that lots of people said was the primary job of marketing was to raise awareness.
Yeah,
which makes sense. But hardly anybody I know actually does brand tracking.
It's like, oh, interesting.
You know what I mean? Like, everybody's got Google ads, and or anyone using Google and Facebook has definitely got all kinds of data that they're puking out of those systems. But it's I would say, unless you're a big company, which is probably where Tracksuit, why they fit in there.
Yeah,
they just don't have resources or the time or the energy or the expertise to measure any kind of brand lift. But everybody believes that it's important. So it's kind of an interesting conundrum.
You know it's important, but you don't need to measure it, because I don't even know if you have a good reason. Those of you out there,
just expensive and confusing.
Can be.
It's not. Yeah. It's not. Yeah, I think for the average person,
that's fair.
Yeah,
I shouldn't poo-poo on it at all, but you're right. So it is. Yeah. Cost can be a barrier
for sure.
Is there anything else that stood out to you?
I mean, those are all the really big ones for me. I think just the idea around, like, I also like one last thing, just as a comment, was I really like the idea of their long play with getting brand tracking into schools and universities.
Yes.
I think that's a really smart play. But also just great for the schools and universities that are using it, because like it's such an important component, as we just talked about, that everyone thinks marketing raises awareness, but there's very few tools that actually can measure it. So I think it's really great to put the tools in people's hands.
Yeah. That's a great point. The earlier you get access to this, the more you start asking for it. And starting in, say, at the school level where people or students are becoming a little bit more comfortable with this idea, okay, we're learning about it. Here's how you're tracking it.
Mm-hmm.
It just makes it, when you get out in the wild, it's like, hey, are we tracking our brand? Yes, no. Well, I know of a tool. I think it's such a smart play on their side too.
Yeah. Yeah.
We want to make sure like we're training these young marketers that are going to be coming up through this ecosystem that they're prepared. And
yeah. And that's it.
I think that's all. Yeah, I think that's all. It was a great conversation. Thanks to you both, gentlemen, for coming on and sharing your insights with us. It was, as always, greatly appreciated. And for everyone else, make sure you like, share, comment. I don't know. What else do we say? Ears. Keep us in your ears.
Go chase that profitability.
And we got a lot of exciting stuff coming.
We got a ton of stuff really exciting.
We got a big trip coming up, Mark. I don't know if you realize we're leaving in like a week.
Yeah.
Over a week.
I know.
That's nuts.
I know. It's and there's the canned craziness thing is for real right now. Just there's so much stuff trying to
remember when we were talking, we were saying, well, what are we going to do when we get there? And now we're like, we don't have any time to do anything else. We're like booked up.
Well, maybe we'll see Connor and Matt.
Well, I hope we see Connor and Matt.
Yeah.
This is an open invitation, Connor and Matt. Actually, we've already reached out to you, so we will be seeing you. It's all good. All right. Have a great rest of your morning. And thank you, listeners, once again. Go chase that profitability, boy. Is that a thing?
Yeah, I guess. I don't know. Probably. It is somewhere. It is now.
I don't know.
It's here.
I had another 5:45 a.m. ride, so I'm already loopy, so don't even.
Yeah, I did yoga this morning. I almost fainted in the class.
There you go.
Yeah.
We're off to a hot start.
Hot start. Not even 8. Well, it's a little after 8.
It's a little after 8. All right, buddy.
All right, man.
Have a great day.
Later.
Bye.